So we'll start then with the Heart Sutra. Page 8. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagawan was dwelling on Massive Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate palagate padasam gate bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yogas of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sashadara Samara Yapi. Tayata, Gate Gate, Padagate, Padasam Gati, Bodhi Soha. By the teachings of the 3 supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, May inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. And then page 15, with the mandala offering. Sashi Purki Shukshina Metu Namari Robling Shi Nitigen Padi Sangi Shindu Mikte Owa Yejoko Namadag Shin La Chu Pa Shu Jetsun Lama Dam Pa Ki Nam Ki Chu Po Kala Kien Se Chu Zin Trig Jita Zampe No Shi Malaza Ye Chiki Chapa Tu Solidam Guratna Mandala Kamnivayatayami Sangi Chudon Sagi Chonamla Changchu Padidabni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipezunamki Trola Panche Sangi Trupasho Sangi Chudon Sagi Chonamla Changchu Padidabni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipezunamki Trola Panche Sangi Trupasho Sangi Chudon Sagi Chonamla Changchu Badu Dabni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipeso Namki Trola Panche Sange Drupashu. So here setting a most profound Mahayana motivation for engaging in listening, reflecting on the profound teachings of the Buddha on the four truths, four noble truths, four truths for noble Arya beings that are indeed truths for those beings. Just as all past great beings of the past have reflected, studied, meditated on this profound topic and gained the realization to benefit the world. Okay, so progressing on from the sort of overview last week, where we had just the outline of the Four Noble Truths, plus looking at, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama always indicated, starting with the two truths and on a foundation of, some working understanding, shall we say, of the two truths. And then here we are looking more in depth at each of the truths in terms of what are called the four aspects, 16, four for each of the four truths, 16 attributes or aspects or so forth of each of the four truths. So I'll be referring to this handout that I think maybe, has everyone got? Everyone has a handout? People who came in later, they have? Yeah, okay, so everyone has. So you'll see at the top of this, it says exploring Buddhism, exploring the truths. So just mentioning here, there's part of the exploring Buddhism is a new program that FPMT is piloting at the moment in the east coast of the US at Jamyang Center in London, and at Vajrayana Institute, and hopefully soon here. We're discussing doing that in this Friday morning time. So doing that. It's like 6 modules, or trialing it. It's 6 modules that starts with exploring the mind, and then exploring meditation, then 4 truths, and it goes on, you know. So there's 6 different modules that probably take place over, well, a year or so. And so anyway, so just mentioning that's where that is coming from. It's quite exciting to be part of this program, Exploring Buddhism. I'm very excited about it. Yeah, so hopefully I can't say when we'll start. I'm still trying to work that out with a program. But just letting you know and actually this is adapted, as it says here on the back, from similar charts in the book Samsara, Nirvana and Buddha Nature, which indeed covers the 4 Noble Truths. That's the topics of the 4 Noble Truths by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thubten Chokyi, and it's part of the Library of Wisdom and a collection from wisdom publications that I don't know what volume they're up to now. Anyway, so are being published currently. Okay, so these 16 attributes, 16 aspects of the 4 truths are found in the Abhidharma Kosha, the Treasury of Knowledge by Vasubandhu, and also in Arya Asanga's Shravaka's Grounds. So Shravaka's, hearers. So just a reminder that the whole presentation on the 4 truths is presented by the Buddha in that first turning of the wheel, which was geared at those hearers and solitary realizers following the Hinayana view. It presents in accordance with the Hinayana view, because the Buddha realized, you know, you've got to meet people where they're at and give according to. So that was in the first turning of the wheel. We will make some references to the middle way, the Mahayana middle way consequence school view, the most refined view, which comes along really from the second turning of the wheel by the Buddha, the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, like the Heart Sutra being, you know, an essential, well, essence of all of those 80,000 sutras, so forth. When I had a brief time at Aptos in California at Rinpoche's house there was a monk every morning getting up and with pure gold, which he had his little teeny tiny fry pan and melted, and every day writing out beautifully the text, the Prajnaparamita text. You've probably seen it's one of the projects on FPMT. And I think these days he's maybe in Nepal, or maybe he's not. I saw he's somewhere else. He's still doing this sort of, you know, long text like this, quite profound. I thought, wow, what a practice, you know, really amazing. And of course, in pure gold, why? Because as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, there were pure gold, acid-free paper. I mean, we do our best. And then the gold doesn't disintegrate because gold doesn't get contaminated. It is precious, but the intention, it's more than that. Yeah. So that, yeah, wonderful, isn't it? Rinpoche's thinking always blows my mind. It blows all our minds, I think, you know. Anyway, so these 16 aspects are presented in, and I'll be referring to this one as well, from the previous Foundation of Buddhist Thought series, where Geshe Tashi Tsering, who was previously at London, now abbot at Serajay, the 4 Noble Truths. So in there, and I've mentioned the book by His Holiness Dalai Lama and Thubten Chokyi, and also reading from Bodhisattva Attitude. So Bodhisattva Attitude, Lama Zopa Rinpoche goes into detail in relation to the 4 aspects of the first Noble Truth. And this book, I mean, I don't know if anyone was there, but it was at the first Lamp of the Path retreat. It comes from that in 2009 or 2010. I've sort of lost track of the years. Maybe 2010 in North Carolina, that have been, you know, sort of in a bit of hiatus for a while, but Rinpoche will be teaching that, I think, August or so on Zoom. So the Lamp on the Path, which is on Atisha's Lamp on the Path. But this was the book that came out of that very first one. Okay. So I think Venerable Sarah Thrasher originally put together a smaller text with a similar title. Can't remember exactly the title, and then it's been elaborated. Okay, so it's, this is in the library. Okay, so just some references. Okay, and it's studied, like all of these presentation on the 16 attributes is studied more in depth, particularly in the master's program, and also in the basic program. And as you can see, you know, part of the Exploring Buddhism, which is like a stepping stone in between. So we're sort of like, as we said last week, you can go more and more in depth, more and more in depth, more and more in depth. And it's sort of, you know, elaborately presented in Maitreya's Ornament. Okay. Which is studied in the master's program in depth. So these 16 aspects, attributes are taught to protect us, to protect sentient beings by suffering and helping us develop wisdom, helping us develop insight. So each one of them, if you will see here, is to counteract a specific distorted conception, misconception that we have about each one. So the way it's laid out is the misconception, and then the correct view is on the other side. Okay. So these misconceptions are all the obstacles to attaining liberation. And they establish the existence of liberation and the method to attain it. So that's why we study, to overcome our habitual, confused, deluded, afflicted patterns of our mind, so that we too can get liberated, we too reach enlightenment. And so each of these aspects or qualities of the truth reveals a specific function of each of the truths. And it's very helpful as we go along, particularly Lama Zopa Rinpoche has aspects of how to meditate on those, particularly in relation to often what's presented more elaborately is in relation to the first Noble Truth, the 4 aspects there, and then the rest are just presented in summary form. So you get more commentary on the first one than you get on all of the others in the teachings. Right? So it's designed to counter the doubts that we might have regarding the possibility of eliminating suffering forever. You know, and let's face it, it's very hard to have great confidence in this basis of perishing aggregates, contaminated aggregates that seem to take up so much of our time, caring for the body, making sure we're healthy, making sure, you know, we're well fed, we have our medicines, we have our surgeries, we do our exercise. What's that? Being clean comes up here. That's one of these. Yeah, that's absolutely one of them. Yes, being clean. So often the body is used as an example here, and particularly when we get to the 3rd one of the First Noble Truth. So the point is to develop confidence, to be able to reflect, meditate on this, gain understanding more and more, deepen our understanding, deepen our conviction. Okay. And also to dispel, so that's on the, confidence that we can be rid of this suffering. And then on the other side, to dispel any doubts we have about nirvana and the possibility of attaining that, whether we're talking about the, sort of lower nirvana or whether we're talking about full enlightenment. So when I was at Vajrayana Institute, and at that time we had a monk, a former Kopan monk, as our translator. And he would say, I will not achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, right? And while that might have been based on his reality check of where his mind was at and how many years he had ahead of him, I'm not sure. But if we start to adopt a view like that, we can close our minds to the possibility, isn't it? We just say, I won't. And it doesn't mean that, of course, he was totally immersed in the Dharma and he was very smart. I mean, I don't know if you've ever met a translator who's not incredibly smart. I just so admire them. Me, who sort of can't get past kakagagana, let alone be the translator. Okay. So we need to gain that confidence that, yes, this is possible. This is possible for me. So dispelling doubts we might have about samsara, the nature of samsara, nature of our suffering existence, the nature of nirvana, and our Buddha nature. So these three aspects, as it is in that book by His Holiness and Venerable Thubten Chokyi, these three aspects come in here. So as we go through each one, it's really good to just reflect and think for ourselves, do I identify with this? To really unpack, how does this manifest in my mind? How do I hold this view? All these misconceptions that are to be refuted. So we sort of make effort to understand these, and that itself helps to chip away at these misconceptions, which then clears the way for wisdom to arise. So as we go along, think, which misconceptions do I hold? Oh, yes, I've definitely got that one. So we have to really be very clear about their nature, the nature of the Four Truths, the nature of each of these aspects. So it is this is a common teaching of the Buddha, as I said, this for the first turning of the wheel, I mean, common to all schools. And the first turning of the wheel was that presented for those Shravakas, those hearers, solitary realizers, those of the, we would say a Hinayana path, but actually today we say Theravadan because Hinayana, there were like 18 sub-schools of that, whereas the one that has survived today that we're familiar with is the Theravadan, right? Which your focus is on individual liberation. So it's taught from that perspective. We'll see that more as we go along. Okay, so, there's many commentaries from all Buddhist schools of thought on these aspects. So it's good to be able to delve deeper and read from different perspectives, read the different presentations and the different nuances of language and the different examples that are used, because one or other of those will resonate with us. Sometimes when we see examples from traditional times from India or Tibet, it sort of seems so long ago and far away and doesn't necessarily connect with us, or because it was presented that, to monastics, and you think, well, I'm not a monastic, So by looking at more contemporary ones, commentaries and so forth, different flavors, we can, just look at it from different angles. Okay. So all the lower schools, so all the schools assert that to be liberated from samsara, we need to realize the selflessness of person, and that's what's focused on in the Four Truths. So, and to realize that not just intellectually, but directly in our practice, to realize each of these aspects. So in the presentation then here, which is according to the as I said, you know, the view of self-liberation. So this selflessness refers to the lack of a self-sufficient, substantial existence. That's a whole big mouthful, and you go, what? Essentially, you know, as we go along, this is the form of selflessness that we have to realize. From a middle way consequence school, this is, so for them, this is the sort of subtle selflessness of person. But for a middle way consequence school, this is a sort of, this is a coarser level. So there's a difference between how different schools will comment on that. Okay. So the middle way autonomy school hold the view, sort of similar, hold the view that of selflessness of person as being the root of all our suffering. So when we get to the middle way consequence school, we add in selflessness of phenomena. But here in this presentation, you won't see that, right? Because this is how the Buddha taught according to the first turning of the wheel. And of course, the Buddha said, yes, you know, the grasping, this innate self-grasping is a problem. You know, this idea, this concept of a self-sufficient. Can you hear okay? Yeah. I know we've got fans, we've got everything on, keeping cool. Self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Of course, the Buddha said, yes, this is a problem, you know, that we do have this innately. It propels us lifetime to lifetime, this innate self-grasping as the root of all our suffering. Indeed, this is a problem. The Buddha taught this as a stepping stone to whittle away our misconceptions about ourselves to get to the more sublime view. So at the coarsest level, keeping in the context that the Buddha was teaching at a time when, you know, it was the Vedas of the Hindu tradition were the predominant teachings in India. And indeed, the Buddha was born into that. He was born into that Brahmin tradition, into the Hindu tradition. When we say Brahmin, in other words, having the opportunity, because of the caste system was so extant that only those of the Brahmin caste were able to actually, you know, pursue spiritual paths. So you had, you know, all the different caste systems, the merchant class and so forth, down to the so-called untouchables, the Dalits, the lepers, who were just sort of outcast of society, really, and no opportunity. Or, you know, you could say the merchant class, you're too busy working and you know, and so forth to have that opportunity. So we can see that today. Anyway, so this was like a stepping stone. So at this course level, what the Buddha is refuting is this concept from the non-Buddhist schools, we would say predominantly the Hindu schools, this idea of Atman, or soul, you know, this sort of view, as if it's something outside of me, you know, my soul, which is some essence of who I am, this idea. You know, and it was held by many people at the time in India, and the lower schools have this sort of, some sort of level of this sort of subtle selflessness, self of person, which, as the Buddha said, it's innate. like while we're in samsara, it's just what propels us lifetime to lifetime, this grasping at this self. Yeah, so Jeffrey Hopkins talks about this as if there's like, in a shop, you have the sales department, and then you have the head salesperson who's sort of like, is part of that, but separate. So something separate and outside of that. We do have that sense of a separate me being in charge of this body, mind, and this is where we say my body, my this, my that, my everything, you know. And so if I say my mind's foggy, well, who's the possessor of this mind that is foggy? This is sort of the interrogation. So the Buddha indicates that, you know, this is what we need to interrogate, this sense of a self totally separate. It's the me, you know, sort of grasping at its inherent me, self, and on top of that, then imputing mine, and then all the other problems of life come out, you know, my family, my body, my this, my that, that we spend so much time on. Okay. So the final view then, so yes, they do, you know, the lower schools do refute to whatever level, you know, the different, more refined views of self, but the final view, as we would say in the middle word, consequence, and nothing inherently exists. So we say mere imputation. Yes, we are here. We conventionally exist, but it's by mere imputation, mere label, and so forth. So this comes along in the second turning of the wheel. It doesn't come along here. Okay. So we need to nonetheless understand the subtlest view, the subtle aspects of the Four Truths. We need to be able to realize that and cut through these pervasive views that we could say still exist quite well today in the world. You know, the other day I went into the city and a gentleman came up, a Sikh man, and he started talking to me. He used to come here when it was a Sikh temple, right? And then I asked him if he was going to the Sikh temple now, and then he started to unpack his whole life story. And but as part of that, it was his sense of like this Atman. He didn't say the word Atman, but like this one. He said, one with this consciousness. This, I don't know, like something separate from himself. I know when I was growing up, I had this view, definitely. I may still have this view. No, I don't still have that view. I don't have the view, but we grasp at it. So because I grew up in a Christian tradition, I grew up Catholic, and you were born with a soul. So then you're trying to, or as a little child, get an image of that soul, get a sense of this soul, you know, and then we project that. So it's that sort of idea. We might have an idea of ourselves right now that we do indeed grasp at. And the Buddha said this is innate because lifetime to lifetime to lifetime propels us while ever we're in samsara. You know, we can whittle away, and that's what the Buddha says to do. And the Buddha says to do, if we, and according to, you know, getting more and more subtler views, if we only look at the coarse aspects of the Four Truths, we won't get liberated, we won't attain enlightenment. So we have to go deeper and deeper and deeper in all of these aspects. Okay, so then looking at our handout. So the first truth, the truth of suffering, and the example given on the right-hand side is the contaminated aggregates, this body-mind continuum, contaminated, polluted. This is the nature of samsara. Not pure, which is why we've got to spend our time cleaning our body. Not pure. So true suffering is, all schools would posit, is the unsatisfactory circumstance that arise from that self-grasping, that grasping as a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, me, right? True origins are grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, plus the afflictions and the polluted karma that arise from that wrong view. And true cessations are the abandonment of suffering. Oh, yes, true cessations are the abandonment of suffering and its origins that arise from grasping at that self-sufficient, substantially existent person. So this is like, you know, when you wake up from a dream, you've been dreaming, and you see that dream object doesn't exist anywhere at all, you know, like it's completely, you grasped at it in the dream, but when you wake up, it doesn't exist, does it? So this can give us some idea like that, like a dream, or like a mirage, like a, you know, dissolving at the things that we grasp at, because it's really hard to be able to grapple with that sense of a inherent existent self, to be able to identify it, but we do need to exactly identify that object. We say object of negation. You know, so when we do that and abandon all the suffering, we completely purified our minds, completely absolved, eradicated all the afflicted states, have a direct perceptual realization of reality, then we have true cessations. And the true path is the wisdom that sees directly the, in this presentation, absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. So this is the view of the lower tenant systems, according to the middle way consequence school, which is indeed the one that we follow. You know, we follow Lama Tsongkhapa. This will only get you to liberation, but there's still, you know, misconceptions arising, so that true suffering from middle way consequence school is the, again, unsatisfactory circumstances rooted in grasping at inherent existence and karma. And the true origins are grasping at inherent existence of persons and phenomena. So this is not according to the lower schools. Plus, as is usually presented, the afflictions and polluted karma that arise from this grasping. So that one's the same. So this is a much more subtle and tenacious self-grasping than the self-sufficient, substantially existent person grasping. It's almost, it's much more difficult, you know, when we're meditating on selflessness, to identify this one. So the first step is we, as I said, correctly identify this object of negation, and that becomes our focal object when we meditate on selflessness. So this is the challenge we face. So it's good to work from the coarser view, you know, to be able to get to the subtler view, but we really, really have to work hard at that. You know, when we, in the basic program, study the tenant system, and you think, why have I got to look at all those lower schools? You know, can't we just jump to the real deal type of thing, or whatever we say? You know, why am I doing all of this? And it's because we, at that course level, we can indeed say, these are manifest in my mind. These ideas, these graspings are there. These wrong conceptions are all there. And that, you know, we have to address is identify correctly and address each and every one of those. So it takes a huge amount of effort. And then the true cessations are the complete eradication of those. And true paths is the wisdom realizing emptiness of inherent existence. So it's much more subtle than the lower school's presentation. So then in relation to these 16 aspects, I just wanted to first of all refer to when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was talking about this enlightened path, he was using a motivation that His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave in Dharamsala one time when he was giving the 8 Mahayana precepts. And so it presents these 4 distorted views in a slightly different order. This motivation, the order you have on the handout is the order that it's usually presented. Just say that, okay. So this was from His Holiness Dalai Lama. I and all sentient beings have been suffering in samsara from beginningless rebirths up to now because of these 4 wrong concepts. Misconceptions, wrong concepts. While the aggregates are not I, the self, because of looking at the aggregates as the self and being attached. I and all sentient beings have been born and suffered in samsara numberless times from beginningless rebirths up to now. While samsaric pleasure is only suffering because of looking at samsaric pleasure as real happiness and being attached, I and all sentient beings have been born and suffered in samsara numberless times from beginningless rebirths up to now. While this body is dirty, it says here impure, because of looking at the body as completely clean and being attached, I and all sentient beings have been born and suffered in samsara numberless times from beginningless rebirths up to now. While all compounded phenomena are in the nature of impermanence, because of looking at compounded phenomena as permanent and being attached, I and all sentient beings have been born in samsara and suffered numberless times from beginningless rebirths up to now. And so if we continue to follow these wrong concepts, so that's the first 4 of the first truth, we continue to endlessly experience unimaginable suffering. And then Rinpoche says what to do to be rid of it. So just there. It's a great teaching. It's okay, it can stay there. Of course. And then, okay, so going back to looking at each one by one. So this first distorted conception, believing that impermanent things to be permanent. So this is, interestingly enough, the first teaching of the Buddha and also the last teaching of the Buddha, the teaching on impermanence. So usually, like the third tenet of the Buddha, but the usually, before the Buddha passed into parinirvana, that teaching on impermanence, usually this is presented when we look at the Lam Rim, impermanence in relation to impermanence and death. It's becomes part of contemplating death. Here we're looking at it at a much more subtle level, right? The subtle impermanence. So the subject is the contaminated aggregates propelled through the force of karma and our root afflictions. And, this is where we interrogate. We do have this misconception, isn't it? Grasping at permanence. So, for example, what happens when you lose something or someone or something you love gets broken, or wears out? And just look what the mind does in relation to that. We can use examples of our concepts of permanence, like diamonds are forever. Forever is one of those concepts of permanence, isn't it? Think about what we might put in the place of diamonds there. So we really need to interrogate all our misconceptions around these. So these examples are a very coarse level. We get impermanence at that level, at least conceptually. At least conceptually, we get that. So, you know, if we look at how do we respond to change, any change? How flexible is the mind, is our mind? How quickly can we pivot? Pivot seems to have become a flavor of the month word. Pivot, you just pivot. I think COVID has taught us pivoting, right? But how do we react to that? How do we react to the fact that, you know, the border might be opening up and whatever, things like that. You know, we just sort of look at this, at least at that coarse level, we can get that. But here it's looking at subtle impermanence so that there's never any moment when anything that is dependent on causes and is conditioned, which is everything, which is impermanent, is actually changing at a most subtle level. So look at the lights. And quite happily, I see an endless stream of light. But intellectually, we know that's not true. Intellectually, we know it's this alternating current, so that it's moment by moment by moment by moment that's arising and disintegrating. But our perception of that isn't that, is it? Until maybe it starts to die, totally disintegrate. And then we see the flickering then when it's really manifest, but we don't see that right now. They're all very nicely functioning. So so this is what we're looking at. The subtlest level of impermanence is indeed that factor of disintegration. So that's happening in every moment, and we can say it's happening in every part of every moment. It's a sort of nature of everything really that occurs. And so it's not that there's some external agent creating that change. It's the nature of things themselves, of everything. You know, we have to interrogate the nature of ourselves, the nature of phenomena, or so forth. Just by virtue of being conditioned, the nature is to have change going on. And we can think that we get this, and we go, yeah, I get that. But again, just watch our minds. What's our flexibility of our minds when change does happen and we perceive it to be because of something external, and how I've got, you know, oh, it's not fair or whatever, it's something out there. Watch how our mind reacts. So I was talking with someone the other day, maybe someone here, but Lama Yeshe, I love it, in one of Lama Yeshe's teachings, I think at Berkeley University. It's in a lecture room. And, you know, this sort of wanting things to be fixed, to be as they are. And so Lama's going, you know, someone comes along and says, the mug goes here. And someone else comes along and goes, no, it goes there. And someone else comes along, no, it goes there. And we have a fight over it. Now, before I ordained, I ordained with Lama Zopa Rinpoche in New Zealand, and before the actual ordination, I arrived in New Zealand. I didn't know before. I knew, well, Rinpoche had said, come to New Zealand and it'll happen in New Zealand, but I didn't know the day it was going to happen. As it turned out, it was on the very last day of Rinpoche's teachings. No, the very last day after all the teachings, when Rinpoche was about to fly out, because I remember Venerable Rogers looking at his clock going, to me, you know, you got to repeat all these things. Hurry up, we've got a plane to catch, come on. No, it was a very joyous occasion, but I didn't know. Anyway, so there I was in New Zealand, and because, you know, when I arrived, my robes were already there. Everyone was excited. George A. Chung, they'd never had an ordination there previously, blah, 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 blah. People were excited, and they said, you know, you're almost nun, so you be with the nuns, you sit with the nuns. So there I was sitting with the nuns, and that meant also doing all the water bowls. And this is the point. I have never had such a stressful time doing water bowls with a bunch of other nuns who just want it perfect for Rinpoche. I was like, they've got to be, you know, a rice grain, and it's got to be this full, and it's got to be in this line. And it's got, I'm like, okay, just tell me what to do. You know? It's that rigidity in our mind, isn't it? And of course, it came from a virtuous place. I'm not denying that. Everybody wanted it most special for Rinpoche. Maybe you relate from various retreats you've been on. And of course, we have the pure motivation, but sometimes it gets a bit mixed up. Yeah. But that's, again, at a very manifest level, but it shows us how our mind operates, isn't it? So impermanence. So we have this misconception, grasping at impermanence, and this subtle level of disintegration, just like the light, disintegrating moment by moment. Of course, we know we change, you know, of course. I can see, we can see a picture of ourselves 10 years ago and say, yeah, I've changed. There's more grey hair, there's more wrinkles, there's more bits going downwards rather than upwards and everything else. Okay, changes happen. What about 10 minutes ago? What about 10 seconds ago? We don't perceive that, do we? That change is happening all the time. So this is this subtle disintegration until it becomes really manifest. And then it's like, oh, now I need, well, these days, now I need an operation to get new bits to replace the ones that have worn out. It's what happens. So, but we really don't notice that. The point is, change is not sudden. You know, this continuous change is the nature of everything. So we struggle with this, you know. Most of us still cling as though things are going to stay the same, they're not going to change. So think of ourselves. We think of ourselves having this constancy, we're going to go on. Even we do know, yes, I am a different person to then, and I've done all the meditations on continuity of mind. There's still this sense of a perhaps eternal, unchanging person here somewhere. Remember one of Julia Gillard's famous lines? If you met the real Julia, or if you haven't met the real Julia Gillard, it became a headline. We all have that, really. If you knew the real me, we have some sense of that, don't we? Oh, absolutely, I think so. So let's read from Lama Zopa Rinpoche's on the impermanence, how to reflect on this one. Ooh. Now that one should be coming up. I have to remember that the fans all blow things off the table, so I need to anchor them down. Thank you so much. You just pop here. Thank you so much. Okay. It's okay. I just got to remember. Okay. Impermanence. It is because of not meditating, not being aware, and not realizing that phenomena are in the nature of impermanence that we live our lives with the concept of permanence, believing that things are going to last for a long time and becoming attached to them. Then when things do change and death or decay comes to us or to someone in our family, it's an unbelievable shock. I mean, how many times have we heard people facing that shock? This woman I was asked to visit when it was predicted she had 3 days to live. She was in the hospital, 3 days to live. And when I got there, I could see the shock on her face. But then when those 3 days went by and she had all the medical treatments and so forth, she lasted 3 years. So then you relax, isn't it? Then you relax. And she wasn't always relaxed. Sometimes it looked like she was about to die, but yeah, we do. Okay, because I'm not meditating. Then when things do change, we get an unbelievable shock. We have a nervous breakdown or go crazy. For example, Rinpoche used this example. The first time I went to Malaysia, I stayed at the house of a wealthy family because there was no centre. Many lamas had stayed there previously and given the family Buddha statues. I heard that one day the son suddenly died and the father couldn't stand it. He threw all the statues on the floor and broke them. Now, those of you who know a little bit about karma know that's pretty heavy negative karma, because he thought that Buddha had not taken care of his family. We have so many misconceptions or expectations. That is what happens when you don't think about impermanence. You think things are permanent, and then you think you and your family will live for a long time. Then when things suddenly change, even though that's the nature of life, it's an unbelievable shock. It's true, isn't it? You know, this morning a friend rang me. Actually, he rang to tell, he lives near Vajrayana Institute. He sort of says, well, I'm not Buddhist. If I was Buddhist, I'd be Zen, I think. But he's gone to a lot of His Holiness teachings. He's supported the centre and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he said, when my morning walk, he walks to the centre and just walks around the stupa and sits down and does some meditation. Anyway, he said, and then yesterday when he was doing that, he saw Venerable Thubten, so they had a good catch up. So hides from Venerable Thubten. But what was my point? What point was it? I know, I lost the actual track of my point. Oh yeah, no, death. Yes, I was talking about expectations, but this is the death one from going on from Rinpoche's quote. And so he told me he had cataract surgery in December, and his surgeon had really wanted to push through the two operations quickly on top of each other, as quickly as they could get them done, so that it was done by the end of the year and his cataracts were removed, which indeed happened. And so then he rang to just recently to make an appointment for a follow-up. His surgeon had died. He's in his 50s. He's a lovely Indian guy. I put him on the dedication list because he said, oh, everyone loved him. I said, oh, Khan, Dr. Khan, oh, Khan's great. No, anyway, he's on the list. He got COVID and died. No, he's not alone in that. And even though these are the course levels, it is very helpful, the most helpful, I think, in terms of being our reminder about impermanence, isn't it? Gone like that. So this is the crux of the Buddha's teachings, this one. I'll just refer to Geshe Tashi Tsering. Yeah. So this is the another perspective, another example. It's good to look at different examples. So Geshe Tashi says, the aspect of impermanence that poses the greatest challenge to our understanding is the fact that when phenomena come into being due to causes and conditions, those same causes and conditions that produce them at the same moment contain the seeds of their destruction at the same moment. In other words, in nature, impermanent. In a BBC program on the human body a few years ago, a scientist said that genes destroy themselves through the process of being created. Simultaneous with their formation, they begin to break apart. This is this disintegration. So that's very similar to the Buddha's idea, isn't it? Within every act of creation is the seed of disintegration, of destruction, impermanence. Very helpful. Okay, so keep having to find where I put the table. So here we are, believing impermanent things to be permanent. Now, when you say, I don't believe that, but I do experience them like that. And the aspect that we need to get is that they are indeed impermanent. Why? Because of undergoing continuous moment by moment by moment by moment change, momentary arising and disintegrating. And it's very useful to focus on the disintegration, the going out of existence. All right, that's and then the next one, the contaminated aggregates are by nature suffering because they are under the control of karma and afflictions. And this one is to counter the view believing unsatisfactory things to be pleasurable. So that we're constantly regarding this misconception, it's quite pervasive in our culture, believing that things are by nature pleasure. Just look at how much time we spend on our sense engagement, sensorial engagement. And Buddha said, well, actually, no, all of our experiences are by nature suffering because they're under the control of karma and afflictions, that we have these contaminated aggregates, body and mind, polluted by ignorance. So this really, we could say, you know, we cling to those pleasurable experiences. Like, I remember when the book, When the Chocolate Runs Out, came out, Lama Yeshe's little book, When the Chocolate Runs Out. And the book flew off the shelf. And I thought, I don't think people have got the runs out bit. I think they got the chocolate bit. Oh, chocolate? Oh, that was a good promo. Nice little, it was a chocolate covered book, if you remember. Those who've seen the little, you know, When the Chocolate Runs Out book, I think. And so Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, if we've tasted everything there is to taste, we've had every experience, there's no more pleasure to be had to find somewhere. But how do we hold this view? Just look at, as soon as there's an opportunity, you know, in these pandemic times, people want to travel, right? I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, my brother had booked a cruise in Europe somewhere or somewhere overseas. And of course, what was the first thing we saw? All the COVID on the cruise ships. We saw it here, quite manifest. So cruises were out, but he was looking forward to when that cruise was going to happen. And it's just like, are you crazy? Can you see what's happening on the ships? I mean, I didn't say that to my brother, but I sort of, but interrogate that, like, so how does that thinking work? Because the mind yearning at that experience, that pleasure, that so forth. And we want to travel, go somewhere else, experience something different. It's all in samsara. It's all in the nature of suffering. But just see how we do that. So this is looking at also at the level of suffering of change, refutes this idea that the nature, if it was by nature, if it was pleasurable from its own side, well, for a start, before we even get to the nature of change, absolutely everybody would adore chocolate. I know that not to be true from personal experience, but also would see it as delicious. But then we say, well, it would also pervade all realms of existence. And so, as I have been told by my dog-loving friends, chocolate is dangerous for dogs, right? This is what I told, dangerous for dogs. I don't think dogs always get that message. So friends of mine in Victoria many years ago, it was Easter, and they had Easter eggs, and they left them on the bed and went out. And they didn't worry about the dog because the dog had never shown any interest in chocolate. They come back and there's wrappers everywhere. poor dog. They were devastated, of course. But, you know, so for a dog, for myself, the chocolate is not inherently existent from its own side by any means. The same monk I was talking about before, people at, there was a resident at Vajrayana Institute who said, I love chocolate. He says, you can't love chocolate. Like, you can't love chocolate. You can be very attached to it, but it's not an object of love. But we do say that, don't we? We grasp at it like that. So suffering of change, you know, refutes that. And then we have to look at examples of that to really resonate for us. So we know that those pleasurable situations are not in the by nature lasting change, nor are they in the nature of pleasure. Just like the disintegration is built into every moment of anything, any phenomena. Also, the fact that these are by nature suffering is built in. We just don't notice it because, again, we need it really obvious. So a traditional example that is given, isn't it, is, okay, you've been sitting for a while. Anybody feeling a bit like you want to stand up? Maybe. Len saying yes. Nobody else dare to say. And then we stand up and it's a relief from the suffering of sitting. I always like to say, I enjoy the suffering of standing. And we think, you know, that feels pleasant, but it's only a sort of temporary relief from that more manifest suffering of sitting. Because if you were indeed to stand there for a period of time, particularly if you suffer low blood pressure or anything like that, things are going to get pretty scary pretty quickly if you're just standing. I don't know if anyone's ever tried that, but you stand for an hour or two, sometimes like that, like when maybe in the palliative care, and you find yourself standing and standing and standing till a point where you can't stand anymore, you know. It's true. I went to in Adelaide one time in my previous life, theatre, singing, dancing, and I was at Adelaide Festival, very excitingly, it's happening again this year, but I'm not so excited because I'm not going and I'm not so interested these days. But there was a performance company from Singapore, Cloudgate Theatre, I still remember the name, Cloudgate Theatre, and they did the most beautiful, ephemeral dance. Things seemed to merge out of nowhere and dissolve back into nowhere, like it was beautiful. But I spent most of my time, I managed to get a seat pretty close to the front. There was one person standing stock still, 45 minutes this dance went on. He stood there stock still, did not move, and I was close and I was like, is he moving any muscles whatsoever? And not only that, there was rice pouring down on his head. I could only conclude he's a great meditator. You know, had to be, right, to be able to have that quality. Those of us who don't have that quality would be shifting around pretty quickly. So it is true that any external objects that induce pleasure cannot provide any lasting satisfaction, any lasting pleasure. They can't by their nature. So someone offers you, example with the chocolate cake. Someone offers you a chocolate cake or the most delicious cake you like, and you know, vanilla cake, whatever. Pick your most favorite cake. Someone offers you that. Now you wouldn't say, it's okay. I had one when I was 5 years old. It's okay. I'm good with that. Would we? You wouldn't say, no, I'm happy with that because that experience is still with me from 5 years old. No, we don't do that at all. That experience is long gone. In fact, we can't even remember if we had one when we were 5 years old. We can't even remember those experiences, let alone past lives. So we mistakenly believe that these are by nature pleasure when they're really just that relief, previous moment of suffering, of manifest suffering. And so we interrogate this, you know, if we look more elaborately at the four truths, at the first noble truth, in terms of, you know, the presentation on these three levels of suffering. So, you know, suffering of suffering, suffering of pain, suffering of change, all pervasive suffering of no matter where we are in samsara, it is in the nature of suffering. Conclusion, no matter where we fly to for that new wonderful experience, it is in the nature of suffering, etc., etc. So getting that one. So as it says, they are in the nature of suffering because they're under the control of karma and afflictions. So again, we don't have one there. Okay, so Geshe Tashi says, no, that's not that one. It's okay. Okay. I didn't put a sticky in. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, how to meditate on this. Sorry, I'm just saying, yeah, we've got those three levels. Because of totally believing that samsara and its pleasures are real happiness, when in reality they are real suffering, I become attached to them, and this ties me to samsara with the chain of the 12 dependent related limbs, causing me to continuously be reborn in samsara and experience suffering. So the 12 links of dependent origination, 12 dependent related limbs is a, you know, more elaborate unpacking of the Four Noble Truths. My mind is so blocked, so obscured that I can't see all the unimaginable suffering of past lives, and I can't see that I will have to go through all the samsaric sufferings in future lives. As my mind is purified, I'll gradually be able to remember all the experience from thousands and billions of past lives. I will also see many hundreds of thousands of lives into the future. I will see that being in samsara for even a second is like being at the very center of a fire. It is totally scary. I will understand that reincarnating again in samsara is most terrifying. Like a prisoner trapped in his cell, I won't want to be imprisoned even one more minute or one more second. I will only want to be free. To be in samsara is unbelievably, unbelievably sad. So in the Guru Puja, the verse that this translation, we have it a little bit different in ours. Samsara is extremely unbearable like a prison, you know, to see, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said to, you know, us, you know, in Liberation Prison Project, well, the people who are in the physical prison know they're there. The rest of us in a mental prison and we don't realize we're there. Please bless me to give up looking at this very beautiful, happy park or seeing this world as a pleasure grove. And a lot of the time we are just floating along and we do indeed experience it like that. But then at other times, the turmoil of, you know, torrent of suffering is so manifest that we have to do something about it. But often it takes a lot to get us to get that wake-up call. And maybe that wake-up call is, in fact, why I think a lot of people seek out, you know, come to the Dharma Center in the first place or whatever. It's not why everybody does, but just it has been, you know, when it gets, shall we say, too hot to handle. I'll leave that one for the next one. Okay, so this is the second aspect. The third aspect, believing the unattractive or impure to be attractive or pure. This is where where the body comes in. So these number 3 and number 4, we'll just get started on this today, have the views of emptiness in there. So this thing about seeing whatever is attractive, unattractive, or impure to be attractive or pure. So we think about the body as having some inherent attractiveness, whether it's our body or somebody else's, some inherent appeal. And look at how much time we do indeed spend on the body. We have a shower to feel clean. We scrub, we spend our time cleaning the body, and then we come out and we feel fresh and clean, right? And then we have these stinking hot days, and pretty soon it's not feeling too fresh or clean at all, you know. So just look at that. So we interrogate, what do I think is so delightful, so beautiful about this body? You know, which bit of it, which bit of the body is so pure? If this body, propelled by my karma and afflictions, is in the nature of being polluted, being contaminated, where do I find this purity on the basis of the body? And this is where we, you know, have the classic presentations of the meditation on the ugliness of the body, for example. So, of course, the Buddha presented this to monastics to quell any desires for a body out there when you've got vows of celibacy, to help with that. Actually, the Buddha's brother, Nanda, half-brother, because, you know, Buddha's mother passed away after a week after his birth, and then his aunt who raised him. So his younger brother, Nanda, who did indeed get ordained. He had previously been engaged to be married, and he just was so attached to the beauty of his former fiancée that he had a very hard time, you know, in ordination, holding that. Well, he held the vow. I'm not getting too technical about, you know, how you break the vow, but he had a great difficulty because he was still yearning after her and her beauty and so forth. So the Buddha very skillfully showed him, and he could see, I mean, he could see, took him to the God realms and saw all the beautiful, drop-dead, gorgeous beings there, celestial beings, female, because that's what he was into, and said, her, how does she compare to all of these? And there's lots of them. Oh, okay, I think I'll keep going, you know. Okay, I'll keep going, working on my mind, whatever it takes. I'm full of use, whatever it takes. Anyway, that's what I said. We do have this. And so very early on in, you know, when I was first visiting a prison for Liberation Prison Project, and one of the guys who'd come along for meditation was such a beautiful, this Vietnamese guy. He was very serious about his meditation and so forth. And so I had a whole group of guys in the chapel. And he said, could you lead a meditation on subduing or sexual urges? And I thought, I looked around the room first off and thought, is this a setup? You always have to think in a prison setting, is this a setup? But given my age, and in fact, I'm a monastic, it wasn't a setup. You know, I wasn't some young, beautiful bodied person, merely labeled by society that way. Anyway, so it wasn't a setup. He was genuine. I thought, exactly. These guys are in prison and they do have sexual urges and what to do. Anyway, so I thought, no matter if it's a setup or not, or if anyone has a sort of wrong ideas, by the time we get through this meditation, they're going to be so disgusted that there's not going to be any sexual urges. And that's the whole point, that we interrogate all the bits of the body. Which bit is it I'm attracted to, either in myself or someone else? If we take off the skin, you know, it's pretty messy underneath there, right? Beauty is only skin deep. It's true. It's been shown. It could be, is it the pus? Is it the bile? Is it the blood? I mean, we can get as gross as we want, unpacking the bits of the body. Which bit am I attached to? And even when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was meeting with, you know, scientists of the mind who held the view that the brain is the mind, said, do you love your wife? They were blokes. Do you love your wife with your brain? Like, which physical bit is it, you know? Of course, we might say, well, I love their brain, someone else. But really, is it the brain? I mean, that blob of things? No, it's not that. It's what we impute on top. So, and then if you look historically over time, don't we? Historically over time, concepts of beauty of the body have changed. Just look at art. You know, for women, it used to be like being really voluptuous. And then, you know, in the 1920s, you know, Virginia Slims, they wanted to get a cigarette that would attract women and wanted them to be thin. And there was a whole thing of smoke and you'll be thin. It's pretty tragic. Pretty tragic. So they did a slim cigarette. Oh, we have such wrong views, right? So, you know, get it. Yeah. So seeing the impure as pure. So we need to check up, you know, do I have these misconceptions? What view do I have these? How is it that I have these misconceptions? Okay. So I think I'll pause there. We're sort of, what are we up to? The third aspect. We're still doing the second aspect. Third aspect. Which one am I up to? The third. Oh, well, we made some progress. So we'll leave that there for today. We'll continue on in this vein next week. And any announcements? I'm giving a talk tonight about my Indigenous brothers, sisters, all of our Indigenous brothers, sisters. And it was very, very interesting that when I ordained, I had been working in Indigenous studies, academic coordinator at Nirragili at New South Wales Uni. And I thought, all of that's going to go by the wayside, but Rinpoche had other ideas. So I just thought, you know, this would, you know, that's very interesting because we think, oh, no, me thinks, oh, but now I'm being a Buddhist nun. That's, you know, I was doing that in my past life, you know, my other life that I'm leaving behind. And so, oh, no, very good. You've got to do this. Think of the benefit for human beings. So we're going to sort of talk around that topic tonight. Just a relaxed talk, I think. So that's tonight. And then tomorrow afternoon, we have Vajrasattva practice. And then Sunday, discovering Buddhism, meditation, so forth, a regular Sunday. Okay, I think that's it. Anything else? Thank you very much, everybody. We'll dedicate. Page 17. Gewadihi no hodo jalama sange ndro gyone Roha Chikyam Mahalupa De Sahalam Rupa Shoi Janchut Sencho Grimpo Make Panam Ge Kuchik Kepanyam Pa Me Payam Gong Gong Du Pelwa Shu. And then page 19, Long Life Prayers, His Holiness Dalai Lama. Chik Ten Kam Dip Pende Ma Lupa Gang Le Chung Wei Sam Pe Yi Shin Kadrin Sung Ming Tenzin Ya Tula So Wa Deb So Tu She Page 22, Long Life Prayer for Kyabje Zopa Rinpoche. So Shan She Chan Good Galway Tenzin Yam Pelway Konso Dupo Chu Som Ko We Le Mon Tu Dro Ha Da Su Du She Gon Du Shat Tin Shu. And Long Life Prayer for Tenzin Osul. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition essence of Buddha's teachings. O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very much. I have to stop or just end?